The restricted sniper lane erupted with a single flawless setter strike landed from a distance. No one was authorized to fire. A soft alert chimed once, then again. Spotters froze mid-call as the digital display confirmed what their eyes resisted accepting. The hit was valid. Downrange Navy SEAL trainees stared in disbelief, irritation rippling through their ranks. Senior instructors reacted instantly, already convinced a line had been crossed. Someone had violated protocol and consequences were coming. Voices rose. Accusations piled up. One man scoffed, claiming it had to be a system-error, electronics failing under heat and dust. Another sneered that support personnel should stay in their place and leave shooting too. Professionals. That was when a quiet female armory technician stepped forward. The rifle rested naturally in her hands. She didn't hurry. She didn't apologize. Her expression held no defiance, only calm control. The mockery sharpened instead of fading. Boots scraped against concrete as people shifted for a better view. Radios crackled with clipped, uncertain chatter. Phones lifted subtly, recording without being obvious. The range seemed to inhale and hold it caught between judgment and something unnamed. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these real stories of courage. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. Chief Petty Officer? Mara Ellison appeared to be in her late 30s. Though most assumed she was younger, she carried herself without wasted movement or visible fatigue. On paper, her role was unimpressive. Range, armory support, and logistics coordination. She signed weapons in and out, tracked serial numbers, balanced ammo counts at day's end. Her uniform echoed that quiet reality fabric thinned at the elbows. Faded by years of sun and dust, her hair was pulled tight, practical, and forgettable. No medals on her chest, no tabs. No patches hinting at distinction. On a range full of elite shooters, appearances spoke loudly. Patches announced credibility before a word was spoken. Mara wore Nunand, never corrected the assumptions that followed. She avoided attention by habit, not fear. Orders earned a brief nod. Questions received only necessary answers. For her silence wasn't weakness, it was discipline. She knew exactly why the range was staring at her now. She knew the distance. The slight wind shift seconds before the trigger broke. How the barrel temperature would settle just enough to hold zero. None of it had been chance. None of it accidental. She also knew the cost of explaining. Explanation meant names. Names meant records. Records meant doors opening that she had spent years keeping shut, so she stayed silent. Senior Chief Logan Pierce observed with tight restraint. Procedure was his world: checklists, schedules, clearance levels. Emotion irritated him. Uncertainty even more. To Pierce, Mara Ellison was an unplanned variable and, therefore, a problem. Chief Instructor Tyler Rook Harland was the opposite. Loud, imposing, and perpetually scowling, he equated dominance with leadership. Public humiliation was his weapon of choice, especially when authority was challenged without permission. Lieutenant Commander Vanessa Crowe stood slightly back, immaculate and composed. She enforced hierarchy socially long before paperwork became necessary. To her, Mara's presence wasn't dangerous, it was inappropriate. Petty Officer Blake Turner lingered near the equipment racks, curiosity sharpened by control. He escalated tests for sport. Failure proved his expertise. Success annoyed him. Seaman Cole Avery barely hid his grin. Young and eager, he angled his phone just enough to capture faces. Someone was about to be embarrassed, and embarrassment made great stories. Gunnery Sergeant Alina Ruiz said nothing. She leaned against a post, arms crossed, eyes sharp. She watched Mara's hands their ease, the lack of hesitation. Beside her, Sergeant First Class Noah Kinsinka felt unsettled. As an Army Ranger liaison, he'd spent years around operators of every kind. Something about Mara's posture felt familiar, the way she measured the range without turning her head. It nagged at him like a half-remembered dream. Mara felt all of it and reacted to none of it. She checked the wind without instruments. Eyes narrowing as dust shifted along the berm. Her grip adjusted instinctively. These weren't habits learned from manuals. They were burned in through repetition. A faint scar traced the inside of her forearm, barely visible beneath her sleeve. To most, it looked like an old workplace injury. To those who knew better, it told another story. When she finally spoke, she paused not from uncertainty, but from choice. That pause was discipline, not doubt. Training slowed her down. Fear rushed others. Around her, assumptions hardened. Support role. No patches. No earned experience. Restraint mistaken for submission. Quiet mistaken for ignorance. Mara had learned long ago that correcting people rarely changed them. Letting them expose themselves did. She stood steady as judgment closed in. The range buzzed with tension. Waiting for her to explain or break. She did neither. She'd endured worse rooms, heavier scrutiny, higher stakes. Chief Instructor Harland shattered the silence with a humorless laugh. He stepped forward and pointed downrange. If she fired the shot once, she could fire it again. Skill would repeat. Luck would fail. The range leaned in, chairs scraped. Operators drifted closer. This was no longer about safety. It was about proving someone wrong. Mara didn't argue. She checked the chamber, settled behind the rifle, and let her breathing vanish, not shallow. Not forced, simply absent. She waited for the wind to move, feeling it rather than watching flags. The shot cracked, the board refreshed. Another clean setter hit appeared. For a heartbeat, silence, then chaos, curses, demands for recalibration. Harland waved off the spotters, authority faltering. Blake Turner stepped forward, eyes alight. Static targets meant nothing, he said. Real pressure moved. He ordered the automated system in gauge steel, silhouettes sliding unpredictably across the berm. No one laughed. Mara shifted not for comfort, but correctness. She tracked, fired. Targets fell, one by one. Her rhythm never changed. No wasted rounds. No theatrics. Just precision measured and final. Confidence drained from the range, replaced by unease. This wasn't a trick. It was competence stripped of flair. Lieutenant Commander Crow stepped in smoothly, shifting the challenge. Marksmanship was skill, she said. Understanding was knowledge. She gestured to the tactical board and asked Mara to explain the shot. Mara rose, took the marker, and began not with the target, but with the land. She drew ridgelines from memory. Wind corridors. Heat bends. Timing. Her voice stayed even. No bravado. No instruction. Just fact. She spoke of extraction angles and fallback routes without being prompted. Of shadows and sight lines beyond the manual. The officers fell quiet. Phones lowered. Screens dimmed. Whispers replaced jokes. Harland accused her of being coached. Of stolen access. Of unauthorized knowledge. The air shifted. Mara capped the marker and stepped back. She didn't defend herself. Explanations offered too early were never believed. Asterisk Ruiz watched the officers instead, saw tension, avoidance. This wasn't about a shot anymore. It was about a system realizing it might be wrong. Konsink had felt certainty settle in. He'd seen this posture before, the stance of someone who had already survived harsher judgment. Accusations grew louder. Mockery had failed. Skill had unsettled them. Suspicion filled the gap. Mara remained still. The range quieted. Even the wind seemed to pause. Pierce signaled the range office for a personnel. Check. The safety officer typed her name. The screen paused, then locked. Restricted access. No explanation. No denial, just clearance beyond his level. Color drained from his face. Ruiz noticed everything. And waited. Kunsinkade's stomach tightened. He'd known shooters like this before. The quietest ones. The most dangerous. Mara stood at the center of it all unchanged, and for the first time, the range understood this wasn't the end of the story. Asterisk, she caught the looks immediately, the way voices dropped. The way conversations stopped mid-sentence. The way people who held rank suddenly stopped smiling. Attention lingered on the scar, on her hands, on how she read the wind without instruments. Still, No one spoke her rank. No one named a unit. No one confirmed what was forming in their minds. That silence was intentional. It stretched the moment, forcing everyone present to sit with uncertainty. It let speculation do the work, and imagination filled the gaps more powerfully than facts ever could. The range no longer felt hostile or mocking. It felt careful, the kind of caution that appears when people realize they may be standing too close to something they don't fully understand. Mara kept her eyes forward. She offered nothing. She didn't correct the conclusions forming behind her back. She had learned long ago that truth carried more weight when it arrived uninvited. Around her, the mystery deepened. The scar, the instincts, the restricted personnel file. None of it proved anything on its own. Together, they formed a shape no one wanted to name aloud, so the question remained unspoken, hanging in the air like a held breath. Whatever Mara Ellison was, she was not what they had assumed. The range understood that much now. It just didn't know why. Lieutenant Commander Vanessa Crow's patience finally fractured not with anger, but calculation. She straightened her uniform and spoke as if issuing routine administrative orders. She called for a locker search. If there was nothing to conceal, she said, transparency would resolve the disruption. The tone shifted instantly. This was no longer about shooting. This was about control. Two petty officers moved toward the armory corridor, their steps more cautious than before. Mara followed without resistance. She cleared the rifle properly, handed it off by the book, her posture unchanged. She had expected this. It was always how things went when skill embarrassed authority. The locker door opened with a dull, metallic creak. Inside was order deliberate, stripped of anything unnecessary. No clutter. No personal items meant for display. Only function. A compass sat in a padded case, its edges smoothed by use, not ceremony. Practical, relied upon, not admired. Someone lifted it and frowned. It wasn't standard issue for the base. Beneath it lay a compact sidearm modified in ways that immediately caught Blake Turner's attention. The grip angle had been altered. The sights were non-standard. The trigger pull was lighter than regulations allowed on training grounds. This weapon wasn't built for competition or comfort. It was built for speed under pressure. At the bottom of the locker rested a challenge coin, dulled by years of handling. No inscription was visible at first glance. Just wait. The room quieted. Crow stepped closer, irritation bleeding into her voice. She demanded to know where the weapon came from. Who authorized the modifications? Why an armory support technician possessed equipment she couldn't trace? Mara answered only what was required. The items were logged. They were hers. She offered nothing more. That restraint angered Crow more than open defiance ever could. Crow closed the distance, her voice sharpening as it dropped. She said compliance was no longer optional. She said Mara would explain herself immediately. When Mara didn't respond, Crow reached out and seized the front of her uniform, fingers twisting into the fabric just below the collar. The motion was fast, emotional. A mistake. Mara reacted before anyone else fully registered what was happening. Her body turned, weight shifting as her hand trapped Crow's wrist and rotated it just enough to break the grip without causing injury. It was a close-quarters response. Precise, controlled, finished almost the moment it began. Crow stumbled back, shocked more than hurt. Mara released immediately. Both hands came up, palms open as she stepped back to create space. No follow-through. No dominance. No escalation. Just control. The collar of her uniform tore slightly in the motion. For a fraction of a second, no one noticed what had been revealed. Then someone did. Just below the fabric line, faded but unmistakable, a tattoo curved along her collarbone. Not decorative. New. A sniper cell marking, worn down by time and sun. Part of a call sign remained visible, fragmented, incomplete, but recognizable to those who knew what to look for. The room emptied of sound. Not faded, vanished. Radios fell silent. Boots froze mid-step. Conversations stopped in unison. The confidence that had filled Crow's posture moments earlier collapsed into disbelief. Her authority hadn't just been challenged, it had been exposed as misplaced. Senior Chief Pierce stared at the marking, his procedural certainty unraveling. Blake Turner swallowed, his technical objections dying unspoken. Seaman Avery stood frozen, the realization hitting hard that he had been recording the wrong person. Gunnery Sergeant Ruiz closed her eyes briefly, not in shock but recognition. She had seen marks like that before, worn by people who never talked about them. Sergeant First Class Consincate felt the tension in his chest snap into clarity. The familiarity he hadn't been able to place finally took form. This wasn't coincidence. This was history. Crow stepped back, pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Whatever authority she believed she held here no longer applied. Not now, not here. Mara remained where she stood, hands raised a moment longer than necessary. When she lowered them, it was slow and deliberate, a signal that the moment could end if everyone allowed it to. She didn't threaten. She didn't lecture. She didn't claim anything. She simply said no one had been harmed, and no one needed to be. The restraint in her voice carried more weight than anger ever could. It reminded everyone present that she had the ability to escalate, had chosen not to. That choice echoed louder than the shot that had started everything. The room waited for authority to reassert itself. No one moved. The challenge coin still rested in Crow's hand. She looked at it as if seeing it for the first time, then placed it carefully back in the locker without comment. Mara retied her collar, covering the tattoo once more. The mark disappeared from view, but its presence lingered. It couldn't be unseen. The power dynamic had shifted permanently. Where there had been certainty, there was caution. Where there had been judgment, there was doubt. Authority no longer advanced. It withdrew. Mara stepped back toward the range, returning to stillness. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't violated protocol beyond defending herself. She had de-escalated a physical confrontation with discipline born of experience. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Everyone understood the same truth at once. They had crossed a line without knowing it existed, and the person they tried to corner had chosen restraint over humiliation. That choice unsettled them more than any accusation could have. Then the stillness broke. Vehicles approached slowly, tires rolling over gravel, followed by the measured rhythm of boots forming up. Word traveled ahead of them without being spoken. A flag officer had arrived. Rear Admiral Thomas Caldwell stepped onto the range without ceremony, his presence tightening the air the way pressure builds before a storm. What should have been a routine inspection had walked into something else entirely. He took 2 steps forward and stopped, his gaze locked on Mara Ellison. He didn't look confused. He didn't look surprised. He looked certain. He crossed the remaining distance in silence. No one intercepted him. The range seemed to shrink around the sound of his boots as he halted directly in front of her. Then he saluted. Sharp, precise, deliberate. Mara stiffened reflexively and returned it cleanly, posture snapping into alignment with the same discipline she had shown all day. Caldwell held the salute longer than protocol required. Master Chief Ellison, he said quietly. The title landed with weight. He identified her without embellishment, a former special operations sniper, a senior enlisted operator whose service record was not for public discussion. His tone made it clear this was not information to be debated. No one asked questions. The Admiral turned to the rest of the range and let the silence do the work. Faces once filled with certainty now held disbelief. Authority inverted without warning. When he spoke again, his voice was calm, absolute. He said Mara Ellison had served in places most of them would never see, under conditions where ego got people killed. He named no operations, no locations. He didn't need to. He said her choice to work quietly on a range wasn't a demotion, it was exactly that, a choice. No medals listed, no numbers recited. The absence made the truth heavier. Then he said simply, judging people by appearance gets people killed. No one argued. Accountability had entered the room. Mara remained still, hands at her sides. She didn't look relieved. If anything, she looked tired. The range eventually resumed its rhythm, quieter now. Orders were given more carefully. Respect followed her at a distance not demanded but earned long before anyone noticed. And when the day ended, Mara returned to duty the same way she always had. No ceremony, claim, just completion. Because strength rarely announces itself. It waits quiet, disciplined until it's needed.